progress in providing health insurance coverage for the poor. Some of us can't get to college because we can't afford it. But yet, I believe it's worth noting that many of us have the audacity of hope. And that is because there is an emerging leader who has captured the imagination of American voters and the fascination of the world by his own inspiring words. President-elect Barack Obama has said that we are the change we have been waiting for. Therefore, I believe in that statement. Let me say this. I believe in that statement because true progress, if we are to fully unfold Dr. King's vision, his ideals, if we are to make progress, it will only be achieved when our collective voices, and I want to emphasize that, underline collective, our collective voices moves us toward or forward on the path of social and economic justice. And so, therefore, it falls on each and every one of us to embrace President-elect Barack Obama's hopeful viewpoint while we build upon the solid foundation of Dr. King's life work. And that's all about ensuring the inheritance of social equality and economic justice. Not just for one day, but each and every day, in ways small and large, in ways minuscule and mighty, in ways so desperately needed right now. So, in the spirit of optimism, I join with all of you in rededicating ourselves to the ideals of Dr. King and to making economic opportunity a fact of life for all of our people. Thank you. immediately after that, I'm going to ask the China missionary Dr. Sparrier to begin moving for us. Unfortunately, Representative Tony Walker is unable to be with us today. So, David Stop moving forward to pulpit.
Very much. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Carol for inviting me. Paul came to our house to speak on this occasion. Carol was calling for my wife, and she, upon getting the invitation, she said, well, you know, Dr. King is Hiram's boy, so you should have Hiram speak. So this is how I ended up before you, but I guess in a sense he is Dr. King was an alpha, I'm an alpha, so we are brothers. So, as I began, African American theologian Howard Thurman said, when talking about Dr. King, said, may we all remember that the time and the place on the earth are the time and the place of his body. But the memory of his life is as vast, as creative, and as redemptive as his gifts, his time, and the passionate commitment of all his pilots to make it. And as I thought about Dr. King and my memory of Dr. King, I went to August of '63 when the March on Washington. And I really couldn't remember at the time that march was happening. I knew it happened, but I couldn't really remember. I was 11 years old at the time, and in June of 1963, my family had moved to North Virginia from Murfreesboro, North Carolina, about 60 miles down there. And while I didn't remember, King's speech, I did remember the fact that when I grew up in Murfreesboro, North Carolina, that in Murfreesboro, North Carolina, when I wanted to go to the public toilet, I had to go to a colored toilet. I remember that when I wanted to go to the movie, when I went to the movies, I had to go into the bathroom. I remember when I wanted to get one of those hot dogs from Walter's Grill, which is the best hot dog around, I had to go around to the back and get that particular hot dog. I remember traveling from my mother's job one day, and we had very little money and very little gas. In fact, we had about 50 cents. And gas at that time was about 25 cents a gallon, so we thought we could get two gallons. But we stopped at a gas station, and the white proprietor told us, I can't crank my tank for that. You got to move on. So I knew what Dr. King was talking about at that time, even though I was not aware. And when I moved to North Virginia, we went to a church, First Calvary Baptist Church. And up the street from our church was the New Calvary Baptist Church. The New Calvary Baptist Church pastor was Reverend Reed. Reverend Reed was a friend of Dr. King. So in 1965, 1966, around when I was about 13 or 14 years old, Dr. King came to North. And so I told my friend Benjamin, we're leaving First Calvary. We're going over to New Calvary to see Dr. King. And that's exactly what we did. We went over and we saw Dr. King going up to the steps. And the kids we were, we followed up the steps. And it turned out he was doing a press conference. And we went to the door, and the deacon said, well, just hold on. And when everybody got in, he pulled us in. So we went in the press conference. We were part of the press conference with Dr. King. And we could see people looking at us like, why are these kids here? But we were in it. We were in the house, as they said. And at the end of that, we were able to go up and talk to Dr. King. We were able to go up and meet Dr. King. And I don't know exactly what I said, but I do remember shaking his hand and looking at his eye and feeling how powerful this man was and how big his hand was. And Dr. King was my hero from then on. He was my hero. And as I looked at that, that started a process. And I remember April 4th, 1968, our family always watched the CBS in the evening. And I saw that in Memphis, Dr. King was killed. My hero was gone. After that, I was able to go to college, to Williams College in Massachusetts. And when we were in Williams College, it was a small, liberal arts college. We always said that some of that was guilt from killing Dr. King, that they allowed us to go to those kind of institutions. So that's where we went. And I know a professor of mine was part of the movement, and he was part of Fannie Lou Hamer in Chicago when they were trying to get seated. And so he took us down to Mississippi, January of 1972. He took 8 students. He took 3 blacks, 3 whites, and 2 white young ladies. And so we were in Mississippi for a month, Cleveland, Mississippi. Interesting place, being from the east, one east, being from the south. And we were trying to move around, and one evening, we wanted to go to the drive-in theater. And it was 3 white black guys and 2 white girls, and they told us, we don't need you out to do that. You better not do it. So this was only 3 years after that, 1972. And the other experience in Mississippi was that we were driving around trying to understand Mississippi travel, and we drove to Philadelphia, Mississippi. And that was when the civil rights workers were killed. And everybody came to attention when we drove up into Philadelphia, Mississippi. So in that whole moment, I understood at a little level the courage and the commitment that Dr. King had to face all of that, because we were very, very scared. The last thing I'll give you is April 4th, 1982. And April 4th, 1982, for me it was a very powerful day because in 1982, I rededicated my life to the Lord and recommitted to the Lord. And on April 4th, I was baptized. That was the day that I was baptized. And that's the day that I will never forget, because on April 4th, for me, my hero died to give his life for us. And on April 4th, I gave my life back to the Lord. So April 4th is a very powerful day for me. As I think about Dr. King, comes to me that Tavis Smiley always often said that Dr. King was the greatest American that's ever been produced. And I agree with him on that. Because he was an extraordinary treasure that brought transformation in the U.S. and in the world. And oftentimes when people talk about Dr. King, they talk about his prophetic voice, the voice of, I have a dream, I've been to the mountaintop. But for me, it is the voice of the Southern preacher, the Reverend Doctor, who preaches and makes it plain that really speaks to me. That is the voice of Dr. King that speaks to me. It's the voice that can take all of quantum physics and reduces to its essence when he talks about all the caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects any directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be. And you can never, if you're not what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be unless I am what I ought to be. That is the voice of Dr. King that speaks to me. The voice of Dr. King speaks to me when he talks in the measure of a man. He talks about what is the measure of a man. He puts the mirror before you in terms of how should you live your life. He says you judge the measure of a man by his death. Okay, you judge him by his birth. You judge him by his height. By death, he says, what has the man done to develop his talent? What has the man done to develop his family? That's how you judge a man. He says you judge him by his birth. What is his reach into his community? Has he reached out into his community to provide service for those in the community? And he says those two are close and they're good, but he says the ultimate one is the height. And it's not intimacy and intimacy he's talking about, but it's what is that person's relationship with their God? What is their vertical relationship with their God? So that is the Dr. King that speaks to me. And so we're talking about the rock. A quick comment as I close here. You know, we're 9 days before his inauguration, as we talked about. 80 years after the birth of Dr. King. 100 years after the birth of the NAACP. 40 years after Dr. King's assassination. So we are in a historic moment and a historic time. I had the opportunity on November 5th to speak to a group of 6th graders at the Amistad Academy. And in talking to them, I told them this is a singular moment, and it's a moment of Black achievement, a singular moment of Black achievement that we should all be proud of. But that it is part of a continuum that starts with, among others, Frederick Douglass, W. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King. And we should make note of that, keep note of that. But that in all those figures I mentioned, that we should understand that it was that's not a Black achievement, that it was an achievement for diversity. It was an achievement for inclusion, because all of those men benefited from diversity and inclusion. So I said that that's what you should realize. And I told them that I had the opportunity to help sponsor a fundraiser for Barack back in June of 2007. And that I had met with Barack and talked to him and had been able to shake his hand. And the kids, as kids last year, they asked the question, well, who was most excited to shake their hand? Because I told them about Dr. King. Was it more excited to shake Dr. King's hand or more excited to shake Barack's hand? And that was a tough question. And I said it was exciting to shake both hands. But I said if I had to choose, I would choose Dr. King. And maybe that's because when I met him, I was 13, and I've been able to see 40, 45 years of work for his legacy. So maybe I have more history there. I said, but as I think about it, if you ask me that question in 20 years, I hope that it's Barack. Because if it's Barack, it will mean that Barack has transformed the world, that he has done something to move not only the U.S., but the world. So I'm looking forward to 20 years of being able to answer that question and say, it's both, or it is Barack. Thank you very much for the opportunity.